Hey guys, how's it going? My name is Jeff, and today I'm going to be showing you around this 2022 Mazda Miata MX-5 RF, which actually stands for retractable fastback. So I'll be showing you that in a sec, why that name is relevant, but obviously this has the hardtop convertible. And if you're asking why am I showing you this car at this point, that's actually because this is the ND2 version of the Miata. So this is the upgraded version that also features a power buff that we'll get into later, making this a more powerful version of the car since it first came out in 2016. But let me show you the super exciting part, which is the RF component of the car. So first thing we'll do, go ahead and start this under up, and then if we do hold this button here, we get this. How cool is that? So that is a retractable hardtop that is actually sitting in this Miata. And then once everything's all set and done and the top's been put down, the car beeps at you to let you know. And look at that, now we have what is essentially like a Targa, so you get all of your awesome convertible benefits that you would normally find in the Miata, but this time you have the better looking hardtop, and personally I really like the fastback element. So when you're looking at the car, you can see we've got this, which is where the fastback part comes. So we have the retractable fastback, the RF. So the main thing with this car is this car as it sits is priced out around about $35,000, which is a pretty significant increase over the standard car. The standard soft top Miata is available for about $27,000. So this one is quite a bit more, but it does look way better and it would be considered more collectible in the future. So that's kind of a quick look at that. But that's the main feature of this car that makes it the RF. So I figured I'd show you that right off the bat. But let's go ahead and let's talk about what makes this car an ND2, which is what I sort of mentioned earlier. So I'll go ahead and pop the hood for you. So, as we get to take a look, we have our same aggressive front end, nothing new there, but we do have this fantastic color, which is actually optioned on this car. That's the red Soul, Crystal Soul Metallic, which is the best Mazda color, possibly one of the best factory colors ever. So it looks absolutely fantastic. It's actually a $595 option on this car. So under here, it might not look like anything's been changed a whole lot. This is your naturally aspirated 2-liter inline 4 that you see generally available. One of the things I like about this engine bay is you can see there's nothing crazy going on here. There's room to do a different type of cold air intake. Battery's easily accessible. You can pretty much see everything you needed to do. So if you're going to track a car like this, it's nice to know that everything is very easily accessible. This engine is now producing 181 horsepower, which is a huge increase over the 155 horsepower, which originally came on this car when it first came out in 2016. And if you're wondering why that's not that much of a horsepower increase, that's actually because this car only weighs 2,400 pounds. So when you add such a significant increase, it's much more noticeable in this car. Along with that, the redline has also been increased. Originally, the last car redlined at about 6,800. This will now do all the way to 7,000, which is fantastic, and it's so much fun once you get it up there in the revs. Some of the torque curves have been changed a little bit. The previous car, some people mentioned they felt like the car had more get up between around 6 and 7, but this time you'll feel it generally all the way through in terms of a pretty smooth acceleration. And then of course this beautiful engine here is actually mated to our 6-speed manual transmission, which we'll get to later once we move on to the interior. But that's just a quick look at this, and that's one of the things that makes it an ND2, which is a significant horsepower increase while the exterior of the car remains relatively the same. And of course, this car being the RF, I imagine it's a little bit heavier. I don't have all the info off the top of my head. I would just assume with all the extra motors and things like that in there that, you know, maybe it's a little bit heavier. But let's go ahead and let's take a quick look at some of the exterior stuff. Everything's relatively the same, but one weird detail about the RF is this right here. This is not actually a window. It leads you to believe it's a window, but if you were looking at it from the inside, it's actually just a panel, and obviously that's because it's probably trying to hide a lot of the various mechanical gearing and things like that that goes into the actual retractable hardtop. So that's kind of a weird part. We have our main gas tank and things like that. Our typical Miata styling, just to sort of fit everything. It's amazing how much farther the front is, and you get to the back, and the body just generally ends right here. But that's a pretty cool detail. One of the worst parts, though, about the Miata is what I'll show you here. And that's going to be your storage. So if you take a look here, this is your trunk. It's nice that it opens up so you can try to fit anything you can in here, but this is very small. I'm about 6 foot for scale, so you can see that like maybe less than my arm for the actual wingspan of the trunk. So maybe if you got lucky, you could fit 2 people's weekends bags in here, but that would be if you got lucky. There's not a ton of room in here, but yeah, that's kind of biggest problem with the Miata. And then let's go ahead and let's take a look at the interior. Okay, so now we're gonna take a look at the interior of the 2022 Mazda Miata RF. So obviously, like I said, we have this awesome thing right here, which is a 6-speed manual transmission. Holy smokes, is this thing good. This has to be the best feeling transmission ever. The amount of like just easy shifts that you get from it is amazing. This is such a good feeling when you're driving this. But I'll talk more about that later when we get to the driving portion of this. So let's talk about the general feel of it. So is it a compact car? Yes, absolutely. It's an entry-level sports car, so it's going to be small, lightweight, nimble. But let's talk about some of the different nuances here. That we have this, which is a painted door line that actually matches the exterior color, which is not something you see too often. You used to see it done here and there on older cars, but not so much these days. We have some, what appears to be, it's styled to look like carbon fiber. I'm not sure it's actually carbon fiber on the door guards here. You have a window lock adjustment, which is kind of funny because you can stop your passenger from rolling their windows up and down, but doesn't make much sense to me because your passenger's literally like right here. So you can literally just smack them if you decided that they were not doing what you wanted them to do, right? Now, my biggest gripe, I guess we should start there, is the UI for the sort of sound system here in terms of all the buttons, right? So you get this little LCD to manage all of your optional electronics and stuff. It's nice that your AC and all the other stuff is actually on buttons. Heated seats, all good. The heated seats are fun because you can drive with the top down while having the heated seats on, and it makes up for how cold you are. But this is terrible. The touchscreen on this is very slow. You try to maneuver through things and it just feels bad. And then this, most of the time if you're shifting or you want to rest your arm and then shift while driving casually, the amount of times I've accidentally hit this is ridiculous. Not to mention all of the other buttons and things and how you're expected to sort of kind of use this. It's kind of dumb. It doesn't make much sense here that it exists the way it does, and it's kind of a pain. Here's your volume knob. Now, luckily, they put a volume knob on the steering wheel as well, so you can kind of get away from some of that, and you don't have to worry about some of the dumb stuff that can happen in there. But you get away from a lot of that, and that's just, my biggest complaint is just the UI system here. It's not great. It's not that awesome, except it does come with CarPlay and Android Auto, so that negates a lot of that because you can kind of just manage everything off your phone or through the in-app if you wanted to do it that way. Vents. This has 3 fully adjustable vents that are each like this style, which is fantastic. I love these vents because you can put them exactly where you want them to go, and you can open them or close them just like any other vents. And then there's this one asymmetrical vent that's here in the middle, which I'm guessing was done to make space for some of the audio equipment here, which makes sense, I guess. Here's your little knob for the top, which is really easy to use. Pretty straightforward, nothing special, just beeps to let you know when it's done, just kind of like any other retractable top. If you've ever had something like that, it's pretty straightforward. Your massive e-brake handle, which can't be missed. Sometimes it will bump your passenger's leg as you're putting it down, so something to be wary of when you do that. Another weird part is this, how much this takes up of your passenger's foot space. This is obviously making room for the transmission. It's just amazing how much it sticks out. But one of the coolest, sort of quirkiest parts of this car is this. So this is where your cup holders normally are. They're actually just in front of the only glove box in the car. This is the only part that opens and closes to put stuff in. That's literally your only storage in the whole car, which isn't a bad thing if you're just taking the car to drive and enjoy it, but something to consider if you're gonna have it as your only car. But the quirky bits, cup holders, these come out. And there's actually a spot that you can use up here and install the cup holder in. So if you're driving and you don't have a passenger, because obviously they still kind of obstruct their legroom, but they also have this, so you could argue that, but you can put this here, and now you have easier access to your drink as the driver, which is kind of fun. I've already used this more than I've enjoyed it behind me, because this just kind of gets in the way. So that's kind of a cool, fun Miata quirk, but you know, that's just one of the weird things with the Miata. One of the other things is you actually have this different windshield, which actually exists here for when you don't have the retractable hardtop up. This is your wind reduction that sits between the seats here, which is kind of fun. And like I said, there's literally no room behind these seats, but there are some speakers in there, and the sound system is better than you would think for being inside the small little zippy area. And I'm about 6 foot. I can comfortably fit in this car. My head does not touch the roof, and you could still adjust the seats a little bit more than I have, even though they look like there's no more adjustability. You can actually move them back and around more than you would think, which is kind of surprising. But yeah, that's just a quick look at the interior. So I guess really we're gonna get on to what it's like to drive this car. So without any further ado, let's go ahead and let's get it started. Okay, so what's it like to drive the 2022 Miata, or I should say the ND2 version of the Miata? So first of all, we have some actual analog gauge clusters, which is really cool, but on the far left side, everything's actually electronic. So while your RPM gauge and your speedo in front of you are actually analog, this little menu over here can actually be adjusted. You can go through some of the different options, service due, mileage, economy, if you want to go through that, which this car is astoundingly good. I've been averaging between about 32 and 33 miles per gallon, and I've been driving it admittedly a little bit spiritedly, so that's a pretty cool feature to see all that. So that's where a lot of that is. That's the digital gauge, but the other two gauges, your RPM and your miles per hour, are all analog, so that's pretty cool. You can actually turn off your traction control. The car does get a little lively. The 181 horsepower is a welcome addition. That gives this car a little bit more of a get up, and it even has a little blue light like you'll see on some other cars, letting you know when the engine's not quite warm yet. So if you're going to be driving it a little bit more spiritedly or put some more heat into the engine, just something to keep in mind. And we did put the top back up just for the sake of some audio quality bits, so it doesn't come out so aggressive with wind noise, let's say. Man, I cannot say enough good things about what it's like to drive this car. The steering response is great as it gets a little bit more audible in there, and just the shifts, you almost don't even have to think about it. The gear always goes wherever you want it to go. The downshifts are crisp, the upshifts are perfect. You could put like a minimal amount of thinking into the driving, and so it's just between you, the road, throwing it into the whatever gear you're looking for. The car will suggest, it actually has a little gear shifter that tells you which gear it thinks you should be in for economy purposes. But other than that, it doesn't interfere with your driving experience too much. Oh yeah. And so most of the time, even on your standard roads, it'll actually tell you to go all the way into 6th just to make up for the actual sort of economy reason. So even if you're only doing like 30 or 40 miles an hour, which is a pretty interesting touch. And then the downshifts, you don't even notice. The car just makes it so easy. Oh yeah. It sounds so good too as it winds up having all of your RPM available and all the extra horsepower. Is fantastic. This thing is actually pretty quick. I think the 0 to 60s for these cars are actually somewhere around 6 seconds. So it's pretty quick despite being the small displacement, but again, you just can't beat how lightweight this car is. And I'm sure if you look at some of the other companies like Flying Miata, you'll be able to find other power upgrades if you felt like this wasn't enough for you. But I personally enjoy it. I don't even think about the power. The car is so good with the 6-speed manual that you can happily shift through this car without doing illegal speeds, which is a pretty big one in my book. And I'm not the only one that feels this way about this car. The fact of the matter is this car gets rewards every year, and it's consistently been in the top 10 of even some of the bigger magazines like Car and Driver, Motor Trend will consistently put this car in the top 10, despite the fact that this version of the car has been out since 2016. Obviously, like I said earlier, this is the ND2, which features upgraded horsepower, but if everything else remained the same and you gave the car more horsepower, that to me sounds like a winning combination. Of course, it's a better solution. But man, if you haven't driven an ND Miata, you should definitely go do it. This car is what every entry-level sports car should be. Mazda has set the example. The only downside is storage. But if you're not worried about that, then you should buy a Mazda Miata, because this is really good. And the best part is like I said, this car in particular is $35,000. But I can tell you that the other soft top convertible is going to drive just as well, if not better, because of the slight weight reduction by not having the full retractable mechanism. But if you like that, I think it's a bit more collectible that way by having that mechanism. It is a really cool feature, being able to use it kind of whenever you drop it, whether you're sitting in traffic or whatever. It's just a nice touch. And it's personally, I think it looks a little bit better with the whole fastback thing. But man, and you can kind of look behind it. There's a little bit of a blind spot with those black windows that aren't windows that we talked about earlier. But man, what a great car. So really, at the end of the day, the exterior, I like the way it looks. It looks a little bit more aggressive. It's not as happy-go-lucky. I know a lot of people don't like that about the M.I.A.T.A, and then some of the other updates can kind of be hit or miss, but it's a pretty aggressive-looking deal. It comes with an optional well, I say optional. This is the standard option, is the 6-speed manual, but there is an automatic if you wanted to go that direction. The interior is actually really nice, and when I'm driving the car, I don't worry about it. The UI for the stereo system is kind of bad, but the speakers themselves are good. Lastly, the driving experience, the most important thing perhaps for an entry-level sports car. It's one of the best cars you'll ever drive. The Mazda Miata is fantastic. When you're talking about, especially for entry-level sports cars, this thing is the #1 spot. So if you don't care about space, you should buy a Miata. If you enjoy driving, buy a Miata. That's pretty much all I have to say about this. It's just such a good car, other than the speaker issues, but it's not a big deal at the end of the day. You can get around a lot of that. It's just the storage is the biggest one. So with that, if you guys enjoyed that video, go ahead and smash that like button for me. I'd really appreciate it. And get subscribed as I release videos like this regularly. And with that, thank you so much for watching.